What's going on, guys? Jacoborth back, another video of Jacob's Life in Vegas. And here's another reason to love Las Vegas, Nevada. And this one is going to apply particularly to those of you who are moving out here, or if you're thinking about moving out here. And one of the big characteristics to Las Vegas is how transient this city is. And a lot of people look at that actually as very negative. City being transient. If you look it up, Vegas is probably one of the most transient cities in the country, with so many people moving here from other parts of the U.S. and obviously other parts of the world too. But you know, one thing when I came out here, I learned that that's all in your perspective. And I actually look at that, all the transiency that we have, actually as a positive thing out here, because one way to look at it is, yeah, you don't get to meet. Like some people I saw when I looked online before I came out here, some people said, yeah, people don't stay here very long. It's tough to get to meet your neighbors and make new friends and that kind of thing. And that could be true to a degree. But, the other way to look at it is, one of the things I like about it is I get to meet people from all over the country. And it's kind of tough to see, but now I realize how much diversity we have just here, really in the U.S. Just amongst certain parts of the country, certain parts of the U.S. are almost like being from different countries culturally. That's one of the things that, I really like, is I've gotten to meet out here. Like, I'll give an example. It's not a particularly pretty example, but out here I've met some guys from Tennessee. So I haven't met a whole lot of Southerners out here, but there are some, and I've met a handful from Tennessee. And one of the things that they had told me was popular down south that I really had no idea about. Maybe I had a little heard about it a little bit, but I had no idea. Was they were telling me how popular dog fighting is down south. And some people, those of you who are sports fans, you probably remember the Michael Vick case years ago when he was in trouble for dog fighting, and I remember that vividly. But I thought that was just kind of a one-off deal. I didn't realize how much of like an underground sport that was, in the southern part of the country. And I'm sure it happens in pockets all over the U.S. But these guys were telling me that there's big money in breeding dogs and betting on fights and all those kind of things. There's guys who do that for a living, and I had no idea about that. And I grew up in Northern California, and it's just a cultural difference where it's, heck, as far as I know, that's not very popular up in Northern California. But then it's similar to where I tell them stories, like when I was first moved to the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, and I remember the University of California, Berkeley, their athletic program wanted to build a new sports complex for all the student athletes to be able to train in. And what had happened is Berkeley's a small town right near Oakland in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's popularly known for, I guess you could say, its hippie culture, and it's and that culture that came from a lot of the 1960s movements. And when the university announced they wanted to cut these trees down to build this athletic complex, there were people who didn't want them cut down, so they went up and started living in these trees on Berkeley's campus. And these people went up there and actually, were truly living in these trees to prevent them from being cut down. And I saw it myself, because there was a while I was going to Berkeley every Sunday to go train with a guy who played at Cal. And I remember seeing it with my own two eyes, seeing people living up there. They had ropes attached to trees so they could travel back and forth, and they had their own civilization up in these trees on campus to prevent the university from cutting them down, which they eventually did. The university had promised to plant 3 trees for every 1 tree, and even the people living up there still didn't want to come down. And it took a couple years, but they eventually got it. Maybe it was at least a year. It took a while to get everybody out of the trees. They got them cut down, all that kind of thing. But I told that to some people out here. I was telling that story to a buddy of mine from Chicago, and he was just like baffled that people would really do that. And I told him, I said, it really happened. I actually saw it with my own eyes. And I get other questions too, like when I'll tell them I used to work in San Francisco, they'll ask, like, do people really just walk around naked in San Francisco? And because they probably heard about like naked runs through the street and stuff like that. And so I said, nah, I said most people in San Francisco do wear clothes, but those kind of things do happen. And it's the same kind of thing for them, where it's just, I mean, I'll tell them a story, or we'll talk about laws in different states. I'll talk about certain laws in California. They'll talk about laws where they're from, and they just like can't believe some of the things they're hearing because it's just so different. And I actually think that's really cool. And you'll see out here too, and that's another cool thing is, like I remember last fall, and this pertains particularly to sports, like when football season was getting ready to go, they listed in one of the local magazines all the different sports bars who are dedicated to certain NFL teams. So if you were, a Bengals fan, you could go to this bar. If you're a Cowboys fan, you could go to these couple bars. Packers fan, these couple bars. Whatever the case was, because those bars were dedicated to playing the games for those teams every Sunday. And they usually do something like if that team scores, they'll do a shot or something free for everybody there in the sports bar at the time. So because there's a lot of people who come out here from different parts of the country, they still have their ties and they still kind of have their loyalty back to their hometown or their home state where they grew up, and they bring that with them when they come out here. And I remember seeing another example, a perfect example, was I was out going out to a movie theater out in Henderson. And I remember driving down the street and seeing this sports bar that said home of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And I remember just kind of driving by it, and I mean, being out here in Las Vegas, seeing this sign said home of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, it was strange because I'm thinking, we're 1,000 miles away from Nebraska. I've never been inside the place, I haven't looked into it at all, but it's probably a guy who grew up in Nebraska, or at least went to the University of Nebraska. He's an alumni, he's a big-time fan, and moved out here, and he's got his own sports bar now, and I'm sure every Saturday in the fall, he's playing Cornhusker football. So, if you want to, I guess if you're from Nebraska and you want to go watch your games, you know where to go. And I think that's cool that you just get a lot of that out here. I mean, it even happens where, depending on where you're from, if you're from California like me, or you're from, some of the other bigger states, Texas, Florida, New York, stuff like that. One of the other cool things about this being such a transient city is you're going to meet people from your home state, maybe even from your hometown, depending on where you actually grew up. I mean, me being from California, I get to meet a lot of Californians out here. Commonly, I'll meet people from the San Francisco Bay Area where I went to college, and I'll get to talk to them about, where they're from, what part of the Bay Area, that kind of thing. Occasionally, I'll even meet people from where I grew up in California, the Central Valley, from Modesto. Actually, ironically enough, my dentist that I go to out here is actually from Modesto, and he knows the dentist I used to see when I was a kid growing up out there. So it's just kind of funny to have that connection out here, a few hundred miles away from where I grew up, and have that kind of small town connection even out here in Vegas. You're from Arizona or any other part of the Southwest or western part of the U.S., you're going to meet people from your home state. If you're from Chicago, you're going to meet a ton of people out here from Chicago. If you're from New York, you will meet a whole bunch of New Yorkers. That was one of the biggest things that surprised me when I came out here, was all the Chicago and New York people. I mean, I thought Vegas was essentially going to be all Californians. And there are a lot of them out here, plenty of Californians, but the amount of Chicago and New York people really surprised me, to be honest, when I came out here. And it's in any other big state, you're going to meet plenty of people from your home state. If you're from, Missouri or Montana or something like that, you won't meet nearly as many people, but you probably will. You probably will meet some people from your home state, and that's just another way to look at it too. Because I think back to, I remember when I was a kid, I was talking to someone about this, about here in Vegas, how there's so many people here from all over the country, and a lot of people didn't even grow up here, but they come here and still have their ties and certain loyalties back home to where they're from. And I remember telling someone, it's like I remember being a kid in U.S. history, like in junior high school, and you learn about all the waves of immigrants that came to the U.S. and so many people from overseas who came to start their life here. And it's funny because one of the saying I remember hearing was, everyone is from somewhere else. When the U.S. was forming in its really early days, because there were so many immigrants. And here in Vegas, honestly, it kind of feels like the same thing, because there's so many people here from some other part of the country that, they come out here and, they chose to live out here in Vegas, but they didn't grow up here, just like me. I didn't grow up out here, but I've chosen to live out here now. I still have certain ties back home to where I came from. But that's kind of what it feels like out here in Las Vegas, that everybody is from somewhere else, just because, especially in hospitality, most of the people you're going to meet, and in nightlife too, are not going to be from Las Vegas. There's plenty who are, but you're going to see there's a lot of people out here that are from other parts of the country. So that was one of the things I wanted to share that I thought was actually pretty cool. A lot of people look at that as a negative, but I've tried to put a good perspective on that and look at the transiency with a positive viewpoint. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. Go ahead, do me a favor, like and throw a comment down there in the comment box. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and share the video. A lot of you guys have actually been great at doing that thus far, and I appreciate it, and I gotta say thank you for sharing the videos thus far, and there's going to be more to come in the future. So also got the website up, JacobslifeinVegas.com, got that going, so there'll be plenty more good stuff to come here on the channel. That'll be it for this video. I'm Jacob, and this is My Life in Vegas.